So knowing how much you've got saved based on your age is a really good way to determine whether or not you're on track with your retirement goals, and that you don't need to be panicking in later years as to whether or not you have saved enough money or whether or not you're going to have to cut your standard of living dramatically. The older I get, the more I wish I'd made financial decisions early in my years. But as the old saying goes, there's no use crying over spilt milk. What's done is done, and now I get to focus on changing things that are in my control to ensure that I have enough set aside for retirement when I get there. So if you're currently in your 20s, thinking about saving and investing might be the last thing on your mind. It might be an afterthought. After all, you're out of your parents' house for the first time and you're making more than minimum wage. So why should you be thinking about saving? Shouldn't you be spending your money on the finer things in life? Saving and investing may be the last thing on your mind, or at least it was for me when I was that age. You may have gone to college and now you have a large student loan debt. You may have gotten married and you might be wanting to buy a house. While the Federal Reserve doesn't make specific metric for savers in their 20s, instead it compiles savings numbers for people or Americans under the age of 35. The Fed's most recent numbers show that the average savings for the age group that includes 25-year-olds is $11,250. The median is about $3,240. I get it. You might say, I'm in my early 20s. I don't have that much saved up. In fact, you may have recently graduated from college and you have this mountain of student loan debt ranging from anything from more than $40,000. I know some friends of mine that owe up to $200,000, and I feel for them, trust me. The aim of this video is, however, to bring you an awareness more than anything else, based on my own personal experiences, that saving money should not be an afterthought. You shouldn't put it off into the future when you're making more money. Because the reality of it is lifestyle creep is a real thing. The more I earned in my 20s and 30s, the more I justified why I deserve to eat out 4 or 5 times a week, why I deserve to have 5 streaming accounts, and you get my drift. If I was in my 20s and I had to do it all over again, knowing that I probably would have a negative net worth, and that being my liabilities would probably be more than my assets when I'm in my 20s due to me having the student loan debt and me having this much in my bank account, this is what I would do. I would pay more than the minimum amount on my student loan debt, as this would ensure that I paid less interest over time. I'd also set aside funds automatically for short-term goals like traveling, buying a new car, and buying things like that. I would start building credit, but by using a secured credit card. While I personally am aspiring to be debt-free, people wanting to buy a house, they generally will not be able to buy a house cash, so they'd need to have a good credit score, as this will have a direct impact on the interest that the lender is going to offer you. The next thing you need to consider is having an emergency account. And you make sure that with your emergency account, that you're setting aside the funds in a high yield savings account. And while the purpose of the emergency fund is not to make you rich, but rather to cover 3 emergencies, like let's say you've got your tire went out, or your new washing machine shouldn't go out because that should be under warranty. But let's say that your washing machine broke and you needed to get a new washing machine. Those are real emergencies, and not getting the new iPhone 14, unless you're saving for one. But that would be set aside in one of your savings accounts, your goal savings account, as opposed to your emergency fund. People oftentimes ask me, so how much should we have saved up for our emergency fund? We hear people talk about 3 months, 6 months, 18 months. To me, the decision is entirely up to you. But I personally feel that 3 months, if you're in your 20s, is a good goal to aspire towards. The next thing I'd consider doing is opening up an IRA account. And I'd start contributing towards my retirement. The benefits of the Roth IRA is that once I have saved for more than 5 years, that I could take out qualified distributions that are tax and penalty free. In addition to that, if I worked at a particular place and they had a employer match for the 401k or 403b, I would contribute towards it, and I'd make sure that I get the maximum match possible. I would say if you're in your 20s, that a good goal to aspire to is to be contributing 10 to 15% of your income towards your retirement. And I know you might be saying 10 to 15%, that's a lot of money. It seems like a lot. But trust me, it's amazing that after you've done so for a few months, your spending habits will actually adapt to having the less amount available in your checking account, and you will actually start growing wealth. To me, that's a win. on all fronts, right? You're not spending your money on things that you shouldn't be spending on, and your wealth is growing at the same time. If you're in your 30s, the general consensus by financial experts is that by the time you reach your 30s, and hear me out, guys, you should have saved the equivalent of 1 year's salary. Yeah, 1 year. So if you're making $54,000 per year, that's the median income in the US at the moment, at the time of recording this video. Then by the time you're 30, you should have saved up $54,000. And when I say saved up, I'm not referring to cash in your bank account, but what I am referring to is money set aside in your Roth IRA or your traditional 401k. Note this amount will continue to grow and compound. Interest will continue to work on your behalf. You may say, well, I'm nowhere close to that. I'm not close to a year's worth of salary saved up. In fact, most people are not. The Fed's most recent numbers show that on average, the savings age for a group of people who are 30 years old is about $11,250. The median savings is about $3,240. One of my philosophies in life is that I should not be average. And while I'm not competing with others, nor do I think that somebody that's got a lot of income saved for their future is better than somebody that has nothing or very little, I do believe that I can aspire to do my best. And with that in mind, if I found that myself that I had less than a year's salary saved up, this is what I would do. I would assess whether or not I can free up funds in my spending plan so that I can start contributing 10% to my retirement savings. This tends to be a lot easier if you are single, as you can make drastic changes. Whereas if you are married and have kids, it may not be easy to be able to just reduce costs. I mean, I can cut down on my 5 streaming services, which I have to watch football or soccer, as they call it in the United States. But I wouldn't be able to cut down on buying healthy food for my family. I wouldn't be able to cut down on things like paying my mortgage, right? Because I've got a duty to put a roof over my family's head. So if you're in your 30s and you haven't saved anything, that 10% number should probably be close to 15 to 20%. Again, I know this sounds drastic, especially if you've not saved anything in your life, but trust me when I say it is doable. What I want to encourage you to do is to do an audit of your bank account and your credit card account just to see what you're spending your money on and to determine whether or not you can possibly free up some income to be able to start contributing towards your retirement. If cutting costs doesn't get me close to that 15 to 20%, I would need to look at ideas or ways in which I can generate extra income, maybe through side hustles or business initiatives. But the key is to use the surplus that I generate from these side hustles, or take a decent chunk of it, and then to put it towards my retirement, right? Because that's the goal of what I should be aspiring to do. By the time you're in your 30s, you should also have a fully funded emergency fund. And again, I get asked this quite often, how much? How many months? 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? Again, my answer to that is you decide by how much you feel comfortable with. To me, a few factors play into this, like if you are married or if you're single, where do you live? What is your monthly expenses? What type of job do you have? If you were to lose your job today, how long generally in your field does it take for you to get a new job? If there's a hot supply and demand for your job, if there's a big supply and a low demand for the job, I'd have a bigger emergency fund. On the other hand, if there's just a few people that could do what I could do, I might feel more comfortable in having a small emergency fund because I know that I'd be able to get a job within a month or two. But now you might also be considering buying a house, right? And as I mentioned, if you're in your 20s, having a good credit score is important because when you go and apply for a mortgage, your credit score is going to be looked at. And if you've got a bad credit score, it's going to affect the rate that the lender is going to give you. And in turn, you could end up paying a lot more, thousands more in terms of interest based on the quality of your credit score. At this point in time, I'd like to inject a concept into this video called the 4% rule. The 4% rule of thumb suggests that retirees can safely withdraw 4%, or an amount equal to 4% of their savings during the year they retire, and then adjust that for inflation for the next 30 years. So that's assuming, let's say you're going to retire at 65 and you're going to live until you're 95. The 4% rule is simple, and by that I mean opposed to a hard and fast rule for retirement income. Many factors influence the safe withdrawal rate, such as your risk tolerance, the tax rates that's applicable, the tax status of your portfolio. Is it tax deferred or is it not? So there's lots of factors that go into it. And while this rule takes into consideration your life expectancy, it may not be reasonable for everybody given maybe your lineage. Maybe you and your family tend to live beyond 95. So if you are planning based on withdrawing 4% and that's going to get you enough income through till 95, what happens if you live until you're 105 or beyond that? So for the purpose of this video and the content in this video, we are basing a lot of the assumptions with regards to how much you should be setting aside for retirement on this rule. But I am aware that each person's spending philosophy and their needs in retirement may differ. So it's always good to seek the advice of a certified financial advisor who can best advise you given your specific circumstances. The Fed's most recent numbers show that the average savings for the age group of 40-year-old and above is $27,900 and the median savings is $4,710. By the time you hit your 40s, it is recommended that you have 3 times your income saved up. So based on the current median income in the United States, which is about $50,000 a year, you would need to have $150,000 saved up. Well, that's what they suggest. The aim of setting aside enough money for retirement is to be able to maintain your standard of life, right? But sadly, there are many, and I know lots of people that reach the age of retirement that haven't set aside any money or very little money, and they're forced to either downsize, they're forced to live under conditions which they wouldn't like to live under. So just bear that in mind, guys, especially if you're 40 and above, that you need to be serious about this. When you hit your 40s, you may be married, you might have kids, you might have established a career, you might be paying down your mortgage and your student loan debt. If you perform the calculation and you determine or you notice that you have significantly less money set aside to be able to retire comfortably, the worst thing that you can do is to not maximize your retirement fund contributions, nor take full advantage of any match that your employer is offering you. You may say, our finances are fully committed or fully accounted for, so how do I generate extra income at my job? At this point in time, I'd like to strongly encourage you to identify any skills that you might have that you could use to create or start a side hustle, because by starting a side hustle, you could generate extra income, which again, when you create that income, you need to be setting it aside for your retirement purposes. Another thing just to consider, when if it was somebody in my position, let's say I needed to start a side hustle to make up for the time that I lost because I moved over from South Africa to the United States when I was 30 years old. I need to be strategic about the decisions that I make regarding the additional income. I've seen lots of people give up decent and reliable jobs in the hope that they'll start a business that's going to flourish without actually doing the proper due diligence. And yes, I know when you're starting a business, there's always a risk of failure. But when you've got people relying on you, like your wife or husband and your kids, it's something that you really need to think about before you just jump ship and try and pursue this thing. When it comes to online side hustles, there are lots of opportunities to do things at times which will not interfere with your 9-to-5 work. I believe if you have a job and you're fully employed between 9 and 5, that you need to be giving your 100% attention, that you need to be focusing on that. But the hours after that, that's where you can generate these extra income streams, where you can focus on your side hustles and you can generate the money that you need to be able to fill the gap in order for you to have enough money set aside for retirement. Something that my wife and myself do, because we both have side hustles or side businesses, is to ensure that we do it before work. And we also have designated times during the week, maybe in the evenings when we work on these things, but we make sure that we maintain time for each other, that we're spending time with each other and with our kids. So we fit it into our schedule in such a manner that we are focused on growing our businesses for the future, but we don't want to miss the right here and right now. If you're in your 50s, by the time you hit your 50s, you are nearing retirement, but you're not quite there. By the time you hit your 50s, it is recommended that you have got 5 times your annual salary saved up. So again, if we look at the $50,000 median income, you should have at least $250,000 saved up. If you know we're close to that, just take a look at your budget to see if you can change anything. Is there any adjustments that you can make in order for you to stay on track? You can also speak to a certified financial advisor who can maybe help you identify what adjustments you need to make when it comes to retirement. If it comes to your IRA, if you're 50 or older, you can contribute an extra $1,000. When it comes to your 401k or 403b, you can actually contribute $7,500 more, which is called the catch-up for the limits in 2023 or 2023. It's at this age that I want to remind you guys that compound interest really goes into overdrive and starts working for you. So let's say you took out an IRA when you were 30 years old and you have been saving for 20 years by now, and you contributed the maximum amount that you could contribute. So in 2003 and 2004 it was $3,000, in 2005 to 7 it was $4,000, 2008 to 12 it was $5,000, 2013 to 18 is $5,500, and then recently it's been $6,000, and like I said, it's going to increase. You would have contributed just by doing that and by getting the average rate of return. You'd have probably have set aside close on to between $250,000 and $300,000. So let's say that's just from your IRA. Let's say you've also been investing in your employees' 401k and or 403b, and as we speak today, you've got $500,000 set aside, and we assume that your investment is going to grow at 10% per annum. So the power of compound interest, just think of this real quickly. If you've got 500,000, you're going to make 50,000, right? And what happens with that money? That 50,000 gets reinvested. So all of a sudden, 550,000 is going to earn 10%. So you've got 605,000. And if you're 50 years old now and you leave that money in for the next 15 years and we assume a rate of return of 10%, that investment is going to grow to a little over $2 million. And that's just from your 401k side. That's excluding what's going to be happening with your Roth. So just put that into perspective, guys. When the more you've got set aside, the more compound interest can go to work for you. So yes, I'm talking about you being 50 at the moment, but if you are younger, just imagine, yes, you might have 7,000 saved up, but that's going to get bigger and bigger. And when you get to 50, you might have 500,000 set aside, or you might have more than that. And then the power of compound goes into overdrive. Compound interest goes into overdrive. It's going to position you to have more than $1 million by the time you reach retirement. If you're in your 60s, by the time you hit your 60s, it's recommended that you've got 7 times your annual salary saved up. So what this means is that it's suggested if you're making $50,000 a year, that you'd have at least $350,000 saved up. At this point in time, you should have paid your mortgage off, or you should be close to paying it off. If you're not close to paying it off, I want you to consider whether or not maybe now is the time to downsize on your house, so that when you get to the age of retirement, you're not going to be worried about how am I going to pay my mortgage or my bond, depending on where you come from. You can also factor into your calculation maybe income like Social Security income, but if that's as long as it's going to last. But I wouldn't bank on that. But if you wanted to factor that into your calculation, you could do that. It's also a good idea to know what your monthly expenses are and how much you actually need to live off. I recently had this discussion with my parents, my mommy and my daddy, who are nearing retirement. And I asked them to assess and to identify how much they needed on a monthly basis in order to live. Because based on that, we could make decisions about their retirement with regards to how much they need to withdraw in order to continue to live the life that they want to live. The reason you need to know this, and why I feel it's much needed, is to ensure that you plan accordingly now so that you can live a comfortable life in retirement. I don't want you to be in a position when you get there and you say, if only. Let today be the if only moment in your life, so that you make the changes that you need to make right now in order to be in a position when you get to retirement that you'll be able to live and enjoy life. If you're under 40 years old, I trust that this video encouraged you and showed you the power of starting to save and invest right now and not to put it off into the future. If you are over 40, I trust that this video showed you that with the right strategies in place, you can still retire and live a comfortable life, but it might require you making some sacrifices or making some adjustments, and then to be laser focused on your goal of retiring comfortably. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you haven't liked the video, click like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, click subscribe. And I look forward to catching you on the next video real soon. Bye, guys.